Okay, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Chelsea Swanson. I'm a project planner with the Public Works Department, City of Santa Barbara. And tonight joining me will be Derek Bailey, our principal traffic engineer, and Jessica Grant, our supervising transportation planner. And we have Teresa Shotin doing Spanish translation. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an update about the Castillo Street Undercrossing bicycle and pedestrian facility improvements. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions and comments, and you'll be able to use the Q&A feature. You're also welcome to raise your hand, and we can unmute you at that time if you would like to speak. Interpretación disponible. Elija su idioma preferido. So interpretation is available. Please select your preferred language. Okay, so just to orient everyone of what we're talking about this evening, our project is focused on the Castillo Street Undercrossing. So where Castillo Street meets Highway 101. And at the approaches to the undercrossing along Castillo Street and also along Haley Street. We've heard over the years and know that the Castillo Street undercrossing in particular is not comfortable for walking and biking, and that safety improvements are needed. It's also, Castillo Street is a Vision Zero corridor, high priority corridor, which really means that it's a location where there's a pattern of serious injuries or fatal collisions, and they're occurring in a consistent pattern. So it's a corridor that's an important connection between the downtown and the waterfront, and there is a need for safer walking and biking facilities. So again, the purpose of the project is to create safer biking and walking within the Castillo Street undercrossing and the approaches to the undercrossing, which is again a critical connection between West Downtown to coastal attractions. It's also a very important connection for Santa Barbara City College. Purpose of the project is also to fill in gaps in the existing bike network on Castillo and Haley Streets. It's looking to elevate cyclists out of the wet bike lane in the undercrossing, which we know is a problem area. And also the project is looking to widen the sidewalks in areas where we have the opportunity to do so, to create buffers between pedestrians and the heavy traffic along these streets. So some of you may have joined us the last time we did public outreach. This is just a timeline of the planning effort to date. The city received a Measure A grant in 2020 to do a planning effort, and that planning effort was really to study design concepts for walking and biking facilities in this corridor. It was also to host community engagement and coordinate with Caltrans, as well as our facilities will overlap with their right-of-way. We also conducted survey work, which will help for future design as well. So this timeline is just a summary of touch points and milestones to date for this planning effort. And where we are now is we wanted to revisit with the community the latest concept plans and get ready to apply for a grant this summer to fund final design and construction for the project. So I'm going to walk through just some of the need we're looking at. This graphic is representing the need from a bike facility standpoint. If you look at the black arrows, which are concentrated in the downtown area, those are existing bike facilities. So you can see the downtown area is well connected currently. And then you'll see a gap where the red arrows are, where there's a need for bike facilities. And so what we're trying to do with this project is really connect the facilities. This arrow on the lower right corner, that's black on Cliff Drive represents a project we're currently in design. So that'll be the new Cliff Drive separated bike facility. So this project will tie in nicely with that connection as well. And again, these photos are really to demonstrate the need for better bike facilities. The photo on the left is on Castillo Street, and we're looking towards Highway 101. If you use this corridor, you know it's very well traveled for vehicles. And if you're cycling uphill, as this person is doing towards the waterfront, you have to share the roadway with vehicles, usually a very heavy movement of people trying to turn right onto Cliff Drive. On the right, we have a photo of a cyclist on Haley Street headed towards the downtown. And again, there's no separated bike facility in this location. So these are some of the areas we're looking to provide safer facilities. One of the other main issues, if you've traveled this corridor, you know very well, is that the undercrossing itself is perpetually wet, and that is due to a high water table in this location. So cyclists don't feel safe to ride in a wet bike lane within the undercrossing, and we'll talk about in just a minute how the project is proposing to address this issue. So in addition to better bike connectivity, we're looking at opportunities to widen the sidewalk corridor. We have a lot of narrow sidewalk adjacent to fast-moving and heavy vehicular traffic. So in this graphic, the areas highlighted in yellow are existing narrow corridors that we are looking to widen and make more comfortable for walking. The area where you see orange as well, that's where we would also have an elevated bike facility. So it would be at the same level as the sidewalk. And within the undercrossing itself, we'll explain this a little more further along, it would be a shared facility. So this graphic comes from our pedestrian master plan, and it shows the minimum recommended ideal sidewalk corridor. So the 6-foot sidewalk, or what we would call the through pedestrian zone, is ideal with a minimum 4-foot wide. It's called a furnishing zone here, which is really a place where you can put street trees or landscaping if it's appropriate. And so this is the ideal sidewalk corridor width that the project would be aiming to implement. And again, these photos, the one on the left shows a view if you were walking along Castillo towards downtown. It's a narrow sidewalk adjacent to a vertical wall and then traffic on the other side. Less than ideal for walking conditions. The photo on the right is taken on Castillo Street. That's a project we implemented a few years ago, and we widened the sidewalk, and we were able to add in street trees to provide buffer from pedestrians and traffic. So that is, again, the ideal condition that we're looking to achieve with this project. The photo on the left in this image is taken on Haley Street. If we're facing Highway 101 and walking towards Castillo, again, it's a narrow 5-foot wide sidewalk right next to traffic. The image on the right is taken downtown, and that again is an ideal sidewalk corridor with the sidewalk 6-foot sidewalk and then a tree well providing a buffer from the traffic. So this is one of the locations where we would need to remove trees, the palms that you see in the photo on the left. The first time we reached out to the community a few years back, there was support for that tree removal as a trade-off for sidewalk widening in this area. These two photos are taken on Castillo as well. The one on the left is on the west side of Castillo as you walk towards the downtown, and the one on the right is on the east side, also as you walk towards downtown. And really, the purpose is just, again, to highlight the need for better sidewalk and walking facilities in this area. So as I mentioned, we did outreach in 2022, which some of you may have participated in. The concept plans are very similar to what was shared back then. However, there have been some changes. At the initial concept did not include changes to the Castillo Undercrossing itself. It is Caltrans right-of-way. It's not city right-of-way, and really to address the larger issue of having perpetual wetness under there, it would be a very expensive long-term project in the $100 million plus range. So at the time, we weren't proposing to make any changes. However, we did hear from the community to request that we look into expanding the width of the sidewalk in the undercrossing to create a shared facility for walkers and bikers. So we've had meetings with Caltrans and received some initial positive feedback and support for this design concept. And it would really be taking a 5-foot wide sidewalk and again, expanding it by about 3 feet to create a shared facility. So that is something that's been incorporated into the plans. And this is just a graphic that to show that concept. So the image on top is the existing situation in the Castillo Undercrossing. So we have 5-foot sidewalks, and we have 4-foot bike lanes, and then we have 11-foot wide vehicular travel lanes in the middle. And again, the concept, which is shown on the bottom of the screen, is to create a shared space for walking and biking, which would be approximately 8 feet wide. We can't reduce the number of vehicular travel lanes in the undercrossing because it's so well used and the traffic volumes are too high to do that. So this is we're using what we have to propose a shared path in this location. I'm now going to hand off to Derek Bailey, our principal traffic engineer, and he's going to walk through the plans.
Thanks, Chelsea. Again, I'm Derek Bailey. I'm the city traffic engineer. And what you're looking at right now is the intersection of Castillo and Montecito. And the screen is oriented 90 degrees. So the beach is towards the right and Highway 101 is towards the left. Chelsea, if you can hover over 7-Eleven yep, and then the gas station and the vacant corner, caddy corner from that. And so it's worth pointing out too that this intersection is the end location of the future Cliff Drive multi-use path. And so it's going to be along the south side of Montecito Street and end right there. And it'll go all the way out to Hendry's Beach. And so that project is in design right now and should be constructed in a few years. So now we're looking to do a few things with the connection to that Cliff Drive project. One is to possibly improve the connection to the beach and also improve connection to downtown. So one idea that's new since the last time the public looked at this is to widen the sidewalk going down towards the beach. And that would be a multi-use path along the west side of the road and adjacent to the park. So that's something that's new. And so that would go all the way down to the beach, and that would tie into the pedestrian activated traffic signal at Pershing Park by Los Baños Pool. But if we go north of the intersection, that's where we're looking at potential sidewalk widening, raised bike lanes, and towards the freeway would be an in-street shared facility. So I'll kind of walk through each of those features separately. So if we look at the east side of the road next to the vacant lot, sidewalk would be widened there, potentially widened next to the Genealogical Society as well. We're in discussions with them right now about potentially widening in front of their facility. So that would look a lot like the image that Chelsea showed a few slides back, with a 10-foot wide sidewalk and space for tree wells. Be much more comfortable than what's out there right now. There'd be improved street lighting. For going towards the freeway in the downhill direction, like I said, it would be a shared in-street facility. We don't have enough room to provide dedicated facilities for bikes in both directions. And what we heard is it's much more important to provide a protected facility in the uphill direction than the downhill direction. Downhill can generally keep up with traffic easier. Going over to that other side of the road, on the west side of the road, there would be a elevated, separated bike lane. And as it approaches the intersection, it would have an exclusive traffic signal phase so that it can continue south on Castillo or to turn the corner onto the new Cliff Drive facility. And as well, the sidewalk would be widened in this area. And depending on the amount of widening, there would also be some property acquisition required from the Historical Society's property. Again, it would just depend on whether or not there's trees immediately adjacent to that property and the width of the sidewalk, but that's something that has to be worked out as well. If we go to the next slide, we'd be moving up the street towards the freeway. Yeah. And on the east side of the road, you can see that elevated bike lane continues all the way to the 101 off ramp. Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. And then as soon as we've cleared the UPRR undercrossing there, that's where the sidewalk widening and tree wells would potentially begin with improved street lighting. And you'd have a similar configuration across the street with the widened sidewalk and trees. And again, the in-street facility. If we continue up the street, through the undercrossing area itself, that's the widened sidewalk area that would go from 5 feet to 8 feet that Chelsea was describing, and that would be a shared facility. Again, that's as wide as we can get under there and meet Caltrans standards. And unfortunately, that we would like to do wider. It would be more comfortable, but that's the constraints we have due to the bridge structure. But if we're going towards downtown, thanks, Chelsea, there's an elevated bike lane that would continue around the corner towards Haley Street. And then it would drop you down into the street once you've turned the corner. That right turn lane for vehicular traffic would get reshaped so that it's less of a free movement and feels more like a turn. There'd be an improved bike connection from northbound Castillo to continue north on Castillo up towards the DMV. Yep. Thanks, Chelsea. And then for southbound, if you're on southbound Castillo, that would put you into an elevated bike lane right through there. And then once it turns the corner there, that's where the sidewalk would narrow and have to be a shared facility. So we'll have to figure out how to thoughtfully bring those two facilities together. And as well, there's just a few sidewalk widening opportunities through this area. There's Haley Street. That's where the palm trees are. So it's a sidewalk widening opportunity, but the palm trees would have to be removed and they'd be replaced with street trees. But that would provide a wider sidewalk with more separation from traffic. Right in front of the DMV on Castillo Street, the sidewalk narrows down. So the wider sidewalk could be continued right down to the pedestrian access ramp and the crosswalk on the corner. Continuing south on Castillo, there'd be a short opportunity to put in some street trees and a wider sidewalk. And then also directly across Castillo as it goes towards Haley Street as well. Yep. And if we turn the corner and start going down Haley Street, so Haley towards downtown is on the right of the sheet now. So as I mentioned, the bike lane from Castillo Street, that elevated bike lane would drop cyclists down into the street right there. Thank you. And in order to fit a bike lane in on the street right there, we need to make some modifications to the lane configuration, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. But if we continue to the east on the next block, so this is the block between Bath and De La Vina Street. So Bath Street's on the left. De La Vina Street's on the right. So there's no bike lane on this block right now. It would be an important block to fill in the gap with this project because we have improved cycling facilities through the undercrossing. And then later this year, there is going to be a bike lane installed on the block between De La Vina Street and Chapala Street. So eventually this bike lane would continue all the way into the east side to Aliso Street. So there's two options for how to configure a bike lane for eastbound Haley Street through this area. The one that got the best response from the public last time we showed this was a raised bike lane, a sidewalk level bike lane. And that would, what's happening here is we would have to recess the parking into the parkway area. And we would have to do that in order to create enough space for the bike lane. What would happen is we would have to, again, remove the existing trees on that block, and then we would replace them with tree wells. And the spacing of the tree wells would likely dictate how much parking changes there would have to be. There's probably going to have to be about 4 to 5 parking spaces removed on the block, but again, it would depend on just how many tree wells and the spacing of the tree wells. But the bike lane would be up at sidewalk level adjacent to the sidewalk. And if we go to the next slide, yeah. So this would be the view looking east on Haley Street. And you can see how the trees on the right kind of alternate with the parked cars. Yeah, so the parked cars would be recessed into that parkway area between the trees. And then there'd be a bike lane next to the sidewalk on this block. Okay. So that's one option. The other option is just to do an in-street bike lane. And so that would involve pushing the parked vehicles a little bit further into the parkway in order to create enough space for a bike lane. Again, it's about equal as far as the amount of parking removal there would need to be. And again, it would just depend on the tree spacing. If we go to the next slide, you can see the in-street bike lane. You end up with a little bit wider sidewalk than you would in the other configuration, just because of the buffers that would be needed for the cyclists. And again, the parked vehicles would alternate with tree wells. So providing that facility would connect into the Haley Street bike lane network. So a few slides ago, I mentioned that there would have to be some lane configuration changes on Haley Street near Bath. And so the image on the left, that just shows the alignment of the bike lane as it comes up out of the Castillo Undercrossing and then starts heading east on Haley Street. If you look at the image on the right, those arrows show the existing lane designation. So there's 2 lanes that are going towards the freeway and 2 lanes going away from the freeway. One of the lanes is to turn left up Bath, and then the other is to continue east on Haley Street. In order to fit a bike lane into this area, we would have to eliminate one of the lanes. And so we studied that, and we determine what would have to happen in order to squeeze a bike lane in. The image on the left, that red arrow shows the lane that would have to be eliminated. So one of the westbound lanes on Haley Street would have to be eliminated just immediately west of the intersection. The lanes could still open up to 2 lanes going westbound and eventually 3 as you get closer to Castillo Street, but immediately at the intersection, we would need to eliminate one of the lanes for space. Now that by itself, that would have a negative effect on capacity of the intersection. And this does get to be a busy intersection, particularly during the PM peak. If we go to the next slide. Thanks, Chelsea. So I'll start on the bottom left of this image. And so that shows the one westbound lane going towards the freeway. We would maintain the left turn lane going up Bath and the eastbound lane, but you can see what's added there would be the bike lane. If we eliminate one lane on the west side of the intersection, if we go over to the east side of the intersection, you can see there's 2 lanes there right now. One of those lanes would have to be eliminated because there's only one accepting lane on the other side of the intersection. And so that's where we would run into the loss of traffic capacity. In order to make up for that loss in capacity, what would have to happen is Bath Street, coming from the freeway, would have to turn into a one-way street. And the lane that would normally go southbound on Bath Street would turn into a left turn lane to go north on Bath. This actually improves the performance of the intersection. This approach on Bath Street to Haley can get quite busy, particularly in the mornings with people heading towards City College. So this would actually result in a net improvement. But it is a pretty significant circulation change for this neighborhood. And if we go to the next slide, so people that live in the neighborhood or do business in the neighborhood that would normally go south on Bath Street, that are coming from Haley, they would have to make that turn on De La Vina Street and go around the block, either via the back alley or Cottage Grove. So last time we met with the community, the response we got was positive. It seemed like a good trade-off for the overall safety and circulation, but we just want to make sure the community continues to be aware that this change is necessary in order to fit in a cycling facility.
All right, thank you, Derek. Appreciate walking through the plans thoroughly, and that's the project in a nutshell. And so these are our next steps. After tonight's meeting, we're going to have an in-person meeting this weekend on Saturday, March 16th. We will be at the Haley and De La Vina Bridge on the sidewalk. If you joined us last time, it's the same location. And then on April 6th, I'm sorry, and at that meeting, we're not going to have a formal presentation. It'll be informal, like an open house. So you're welcome to come by anytime between 10 and noon. You can look at the plans, write notes on the plans, give us your feedback, comments, questions. And then following that meeting, the next public meeting would be April 16th. We plan to go to City Council, and that's just simply to request their support for staff to seek grant funding for final design and approval. And if we have that support, we would apply for grant funding this summer. If we're successful with that effort, construction would likely be around 2028, 2029. And if we're successful with the grant funding, we will also continue to have community engagement between now and as the plan develops and the final design develops, there will be touch points with the community for additional feedback. So with that, we'd love to hear your comments and questions in the Q&A. I'm going to hand it off to Jessica in just a second. And then if you want to email us any comments or questions, the project email is castillouc@santabarbaraca.gov. I encourage you to go to the project webpage as well at santabarbaraca.gov/Castillo Undercrossing. If you go there, you can look at the concept plans. You can also subscribe to the page. So anytime we have a meeting, you'll be automatically notified. And this webinar is being recorded. We'll also post a recording of the webinar within about a week. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jessica for questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, Chelsea, and thank you everyone for staying on the call. We do have a few questions, and the first two questions that we received are very similar. So, Chelsea, can you get to the plan of just showing the undercrossing area? The two questions, I'll read them both because they're so similar, but will there be any barrier between the shared pathway and the vehicles? And the similar question is the proposed underpass bike lane a class 4 lane? Again, it would be great to have a physical barrier from cars, especially on the underpass. And I'm not sure if you or Derek want to answer that one.
Yeah, it'd be helpful, Chelsea, if you can go to the cross section of the undercrossing. Thanks. The the image on the bottom, that's the image that what it would look like with the widened area. The short answer is no, there will not be physical separation. There just isn't enough room. This area is so constrained. Any kind of barrier between traffic and the elevated sidewalk area would require another 2 feet. And so that sidewalk area would get cut down from 8 to 6. And then once you start talking about shy distance with handlebars and everything like that, it's a very tight shared area as it is. But going down to 6 feet with vertical elements on both sides would make it not a appropriate shared use facility anymore. But I totally acknowledge that physical separation would be good, and I just wish we had more room to work with here.
I think we could stay on this graphic for another question is, so if the bicyclist is heading northbound, their only option is to either bike on the sidewalk or in the road. Is the raised facility on the south side of the road from Montecito to Haley a two-way facility?
No, the raised facility from the, or which section did you ask?
It was, so if a bicyclist is heading northbound, their question, it was a clarification question. Their only option is either bike on the sidewalk or in the road. So
and then which section being a shared use facility?
On the northbound, or if you're out of the street, does that mean that you would go, can the south side be a two-way facility?
Between Highway 101 and Montecito?
Yes.
It's only wide enough for a one-way facility.
And that would be stenciled within the facility or of the direction.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, westbound, there is a dedicated left turn and a dedicated right turn. Isn't there enough space for a dedicated bike lane?
Westbound.
I know I'm sorry. I am trying to understand the question myself. Let's see. Westbound, there is a dedicated left turn lane and a dedicated right turn lane. Isn't there enough space for a dedicated bike lane?
Westbound Montecito, I think that's the only place where there's both the right turn lane and the left turn lane.
Yeah, well, I'll have if this person is still listening, we could have them clarify. Let's move on to the next question. This is with respect to tree removal. Do we have a photograph showing the trees on Haley Street that would need to be removed?
Yep, so on Haley Street, the area that would require tree removal would be these palms that you can see in this photo here. They are actually within city right of way. It's wider than the sidewalk in this location, but those are the trees that we would be looking at, and then proposing new street trees between the vehicular traffic and the sidewalk.
Thank you. The next question is where the liquor store is, right at the corner of Castillo and Montecito. Why is the liquor store parcel not affected by the street widening and added new street trees?
That's a good question. The parking lot would become not functional for the liquor store if there were any sidewalk widening and property taking there. So it would end up being a total take, so it's not a feasible thing to do at this time. If there's ever redevelopment on that parcel, that would be an opportunity to implement the pedestrian master plan.
Thank you. Let's see. Here's another one. Could we keep all car lanes 11 feet and give width to the bikes?
I assume that's through the undercrossing. It is Caltrans standard to have 12 feet next to the curb lane. So you can see in the top image, there is an 11-foot lane, but it's not immediately adjacent to the curb. So once the curb becomes immediately adjacent to the traffic lane, that's when Caltrans requires 12 feet. It's even in a deviation from their standards for the 11-foot interior lanes, but it is an existing condition. So they've thus far indicated openness to keeping that.
Okay. This question is, how does the timing and funding of this project relate to the Cliff Drive project? It sounds like they will be tied together so they can properly coordinate if the Castillo underpass is not yet funded.
This project, the Castillo Undercrossing project, is 2 years behind the Cliff Drive project. So if we have a successful funding application this spring, we would expect construction to probably be about 2 years after Cliff Drive. Cliff Drive is such a long, big project that it might be towards the tail end of that project when this one begins construction. But there is a lag just because of the funding cycles.
Thank you for that one. We did have clarification about the westbound. There's a dedicated left turn. He said, to clarify, it says they were referring to the northwest bound Castillo bike lane. Do we consider safety for kids too? Maybe an adult can keep up with traffic, but not kids. I think it's referring to the downhill portion. Northwest.
I'm still not following. I'll describe a few different things and maybe
Okay.
will be so. Southbound Castillo Street, next to the DMV, that bike lane would cross the street and lead into a raised facility. Northbound Castillo Street, once you get past the undercrossing, the bike lane would then split. One option would be to go towards Haley Street, and the other option would be to go up Castillo, so that would be a striped bike lane. The other possible place this might have been, if you can back up to the first set of plans, Chelsea, I think two slides earlier. Yep. So the northbound bike lane on Castillo Street, south of the intersection, so as you're coming up from the beach, that bike lane will end, and then it'll become a shared use facility downhill through the interchange until you get underneath, and then they would hop up onto that 8-foot wide path. And again, we totally acknowledge that a higher level facility would be desirable on a busy street like this, but there's just not enough room. And as far as picking one direction in order to provide priority to the bikes and safety, it was that uphill direction coming from the interchange, especially next to that really busy right turn lane that comes off of Castillo Street and goes towards City College. So that is, that's a trade-off. And as far as the space constraints, it seems to be the best balance of space. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. I think it did, but yeah, please follow up if there's any additional comments on that one for the person that asked that question. The next question is, currently the Ortega pedestrian bike overpass is an excellent path for bikes to the west side and Santa Barbara City College. Ortega seems to be a good candidate to be the major bike conduit from the west side to downtown. Is the thought to emphasize Ortega or route cyclists elsewhere?
The cyclists that want to use Ortega Street right now use Ortega Street. However, some cyclists are choosing to use the Castillo Undercrossing, perhaps because it's a more direct route. But we do have to acknowledge that some people are not using Ortega right now. And so because of that, there's safety issues, and it is appropriate to look at enhancing these facilities.
Great, thank you. There was one question to clarify, where does the raised bike lane start? There's a few sections for the raised bike lane.
Sure. Let's do northbound first. So as we mentioned, from the Montecito intersection, you start going towards the interchange and you're going downhill. So that's a shared in-street facility. And then Chelsea, if you go to the next slide. So that's a shared in-street facility. You go underneath the UPRR bridge. Oops. Then if you go to the next slide, as soon as you get past the southbound on-ramp, over on the right-hand side of the screen. Yeah. So that's that 8-foot wide shared space there. So that would be the beginning of the raised bike lane. And then once you get past the undercrossing, that's where there's enough room to have separate sidewalk and bike areas. So then if you're going southbound, if you start on Castillo Street by the DMV, as soon as you get through that first intersection for the northbound on-ramp, that's where the raised, elevated, separated facility begins. And then when you turn the corner there and you get under the Highway 101 bridge, that's where it would narrow to 8 feet, that shared space. When you go across the southbound off-ramp intersection, once you're through that intersection, you would get back onto a raised, elevated section, and that would take you all the way down to Montecito Street.
Great, thanks, Derek. Question is, going north on Castillo, continuing to the DMV, is there a plan to move the crossing actuator closer to Castillo?
Yes, so if this project is funded and moves forward, the traffic signal and traffic signal equipment would be completely replaced at this intersection, and that would include appropriate bike detection, both in-street loops. I think we're starting to realize it's a good practice to also supplement that with push buttons, where the push buttons are easily accessible. Some cyclists just like the confirmation that they've been detected. So we're thinking the new configuration would include both, and it would be convenient to the curb. So if a cyclist is pulled up to the stop bar and is, resting their foot on the curb, the push button would be right there.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. Let's go back to the intersection of Montecito and Castillo. Perfect. So this question is, having biked this intersection many times, the biggest challenge is when coming from Haley through the underpass, but wanting to go straight onto the waterfront. It's very dangerous to make your way to the configuration to the center lane. How will this work in the new configuration?
Very good question. So this is the primary safety issue that we were looking at in this section. So I know, as we've talked about, there's not enough space to do both a northbound and southbound dedicated bike facility. And from a safety and comfort perspective, the southbound facility coming uphill out of the interchange seemed much more important to prioritize. So the cyclists, instead of moving to that through lane, they would actually stay in a dedicated bike lane where, yeah, you can see Chelsea's cursor is, she's hovering over the dedicated bike lane. That's a conflict when it gets to the intersection, that bike lane wanting to go straight and then that really heavy right turn movement. So what would happen there is there would be a dedicated bike signal at that intersection so the cyclists could continue south to the beach or get on the Cliff Drive path, either or. But that would be a dedicated bike signal for that movement.
Great, thank you. Let's see, just want to make sure. There's a few more questions, so thank you for staying on, everyone. Let's see. Are the bike lanes on Haley only one way, even though the road is two-way? So if we can go back to Haley, show that.
So the short answer is yes. Once we get further into the downtown area, like kind of between Chapala and Anacapa Streets, those areas, because our streets in our downtown area aren't very wide, what we've done is every other block has a bike lane going the other direction. So for Haley Street, the bike lane is going eastbound. One block up on Coda Street, the bike lane is going westbound. And then one block up again, the bike lane on Ortega Street is going eastbound. And so this bike lane on Haley Street would feed into that existing bike lane going east. So if somebody was coming from downtown and they wanted to access the Castillo Undercrossing, the best thing to do would be to take Coda Street all the way across to Castillo and then come down in front of the DMV, and then that would feed into the new raised bike lane.
Great. Another question with respect to Haley Street, it's the tree removals again. Do you have a photograph of the trees on Haley Street westbound that would need to be removed? I believe we answered that, Chelsea. It was the palm trees, but maybe go back on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the block they're talking about, but this is the location where there would be palm tree removal on Haley, north side of the street, between Castillo and Bath, that block. Okay. There's one question, it's more funding related. Is there anything the community can do to compress the timeline to 2028 seems very far away? Yeah, I could take that.
Yeah, no, you know this as well as anyone.
No, yes, it is very far away. We're been very fortunate that from the big picture of the 2016 bicycle master plan that we have been able to fund the majority of the plan or the projects that came out of that planning effort, and they're all being funded in different stages, different sources, and this one continues to be, again, a very popular project that arose from the plan, and we're just working towards a funding source for this. We do feel like the Active Transportation Program grant is a perfect source for this, but we'll continue other programming. And unfortunately, the way the programming, if we receive it, it does still take a while to get program and then to do all the final design work. And this project does include some minor right-of-way acquisitions, but that seems to take a while too, and then the construction phase. But it's, again, these, unfortunately, public works projects don't get designed overnight. We would like them all to, but it does, unfortunately. The reality is it does take a while, but we're very vested in the need to make changes because this is, again, has been a community request for a while. Let's see, let's go on. This one was just more of a comment. We need safer bike facilities on the underpass. Sharrows are worse than no bike facilities, as they give people the false sense the road is safe. If you narrow the car lanes, you can fit a proper lane, ideally protected. And I think we did address again on this space constraints, and we're working in the realm of Caltrans design standards for this on lane widths that already a couple of, like, the interior lanes do not 11 feet. Well, that is typical within a city lane. That is an existing lane. It functions, but yeah, once you go to a vertical curb, it is a requirement to have a 12-foot lane for that 1-foot buffer from the raised facility. Let's see. Question: where Castillo branches to Haley is treacherous for bikers heading up Castillo towards Bath. So that was just a general comment. I think that person who made that comment, think maybe some more feedback on the proposed option of the concept of how we're trying to address that transition, if you had anything specific to follow up on that. Let's see. So the next question, there's been a couple on Caltrans related. Is there anything being done about the perpetual water puddling in the underpass? And then a paired question to that: has Caltrans indicated any plans to redo that overpass in the near future?
I can answer that. So again, this is a Caltrans facility, and they are very aware of the problem. As Chelsea mentioned, the order of magnitude of replacing the bridge structure, it would be if it were to be replaced, it would look something like either the State Street undercrossing or the Garden Street undercrossing in terms of the solution. Both of those structures, they're basically bowls or boats. They're the way they were built, they're like a big boat that sits into the ground and it keeps the water out. With this structure, there are leaks in the underslab, and so unfortunately that's where the water is coming from. About 6-7 years ago, Caltrans installed what's called a topper slab over top of the original structure itself under there, and it's held up fairly well. This year with the wet weather, the water table must be rising and leaking more water into the structure. So what we've been talking about with Caltrans is when we hopefully get funding with this project, that topper slab is going to need to be replaced in order to widen the sidewalks to 8 feet under there. And we'll likely extend that topper slab a little bit further up the hill in either direction. Caltrans totally acknowledged when the topper slab was built back in the late teens that it would probably last about 10 years if conditions stayed dry. And so we are starting to see some failures now, especially with the wet weather. So again, this is something that they just don't have $100 million to replace the structure. I don't know if or when it'll ever happen. They haven't indicated, but I know the cost of redoing a slab for $1 million or $2 million every 10 years is a lot less expensive than the $100 million option. So we would love to see it replaced, but I understand why they can't right now. So that's going to be our approach with Caltrans, is likely to extend that topper slab a little bit further up the hill in either direction. And hopefully that keeps out some more of the water and has an improved surface for cycling and drivers in that area that's perpetually wet right now.
Great. Thanks, Derek. This next one, I think it was a follow-up, another community member mentioned this, but the class 3 bike lane at Montecito and Castillo is totally unsafe and unrealistic. So there's a comment. Can't imagine any families using that with cars. Will there be an opportunity to revisit this before the plan is final?
So as we mentioned, there just isn't enough space for dedicated bike facilities in both directions. So they're totally acknowledge it is a trade-off, but we can only, there's only enough space to fit a dedicated bike facility in one direction. So if anybody attending thinks that the way we've shown it is wrong in terms of which direction, we're totally willing to revisit that. We think from a safety perspective, the uphill southbound direction next to that busy right turn lane is the appropriate direction. But there just isn't enough room to do something different for the northbound direction.
Yes, within the given right of way without significant right away acquisition.
Even that,
yeah.
it's the UPRR undercrossing
Mm-hmm.
is a pinch point, and there's, once you get to that UPR undercrossing, there's only enough room to have a raised cycling facility in one direction.
Great, thanks, Derek. Just a general comment. Thank you for your dedication to bike and ped safety. Thank you for the comment. Next question, how will a bicyclist heading northbound from Montecito toward Haley transition onto the elevated shared facility? A ramp with curb cuts, could conflict striping or other treatment help guide them onto the new facility?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we would have to work out with Caltrans because it would be within their right of way. But if you go over to the right-hand part of the screen, Chelsea, if you can hover over the on-ramp area. Yeah, so as cyclists are coming through that on-ramp, then they would, there'd be a ramp to get onto the elevated area. We're also planning a second ramp. So if something happens that cyclists miss that first ramp and they stay in the traffic lane as they go through the undercrossing, there would be a ramp kind of in that area right there as they're starting to climb that hill, that they could have a second opportunity to get into the bike facilities.
So the question is, let's see, is the cost of an additional pedestrian bike overpass prohibitive? Say between Ortega and State.
Well, it's a lot of money. We're actually studying, Chelsea's the project manager on this right now, but we're studying a pedestrian overcrossing in the Lower East Side neighborhood that would connect the Lower East Side to the Dwight Murphy Zoo area. That's an area of town where there's a really long distance between crossing areas for pedestrians and cyclists from Milpa Street all the way out to Cabrillo. And how much was that one, Chelsea? 30?
The total project costs estimate is 32 million for design, construction, everything.
Yeah.
For that. So.
And so order of magnitude, obviously each location is a little bit different, but you know, that's ballpark what a pedestrian overpass would be looking at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Clarification on for Healy and other streets that don't have a dedicated bike lane in both directions. Will those be marked with sharrows? So I think it's just meaning like any class 3 facility.
We weren't planning to, other than for wayfinding. So for example, the northbound Castillo route where there is no alternate route, that would likely have sharrows just for positioning and wayfinding. But as far as westbound Haley Street, I think the route we would encourage people to use would be on Coda Street, one block up.
Great. Let's see, this is a driveway clarification. There is an existing driveway not shown on along Castillo on the uphill portion along the if I'm saying that right, Fernald Mansion is the proposed plan to remove and add the new tree that is shown on the drawing.
Oh, that's a good catch. When we met with the property managers, I think their desire was to keep that driveway. So if that's their desire, that driveway could be maintained. Could go either way. We would work that out in design.
Mm-hmm. Question on the bike, basic dedicated bike signal detection. So I understand you've incorporated a dedicated bike signal at Castillo and Montecito Streets intersection, but this design still seems unsafe for cyclists. Seems like a prime location for cars to make right on reds, which is dangerous if the bike lane is on the outside. Are you certain that there's not enough room for safer bike lanes? The car lanes are designed are 12 feet wide, which is wider than standard minimums.
So in this area, the traffic lanes are not 12 feet wide. So this area, as you transition from Caltrans into the city, we're more comfortable than Caltrans is with narrower lanes. So there are narrower lanes in this section. We would go 11 feet next to the curbs and then 10 feet on the interior lanes. But the decision to keep the bike lane to the right turn lane, the alternative to that would be cyclists would have to weave through that right turning traffic and get into a bike slot in between the right turning traffic and the through traffic. And so that would be asking cyclists to weave between traffic while cyclists are going uphill. So they'd be going a little bit slower. And that right turn movement is heavy, like 600 to 700 vehicles per hour, which in traffic terms for a right turning movement, that's really heavy. Like 200 to 300 an hour is heavy. So 600 to 700 an hour is like really heavy. So I think I disagree with whoever made that comment, because the alternative of trying to get cyclists to weave through into a bike slot between the through lane and the right turn lane is definitely less safe.
Mhm.
There would be, we would have to add no right on red prohibitions to address what the person was asking about.
Great. This question is from a safety point of view, how does the shared facility of the bikes and pedestrians work? Are there markings on the surface?
Yes, there would likely be markings on the surface. There isn't enough room with only 8 feet to have dedicated lanes within that 8 feet, but there'd probably be some small stencils encouraging pedestrians to position themselves next to the walls and the cyclists on the inside.
Okay. Have you considered removing a car lane?
Yes, we did. And unfortunately, the traffic volumes are such that it would create a lot of congestion.
Question, going back to the shared facility, doesn't the shared facility give bikers the impression that it is okay to ride on the sidewalks elsewhere in the city, as many do?
It'll have markings and stencils, which would differentiate it from a standard sidewalk.
Let's see. Apologize there. Okay. Is there any plans for Caltrans to widen Highway 101 through this area in the future?
None that we know of. There's, as far as we know, the existing widening project to the south of the city will complete the Highway 101 widening.
Going back to the tree removal again, now it's a clarification. We clarified the westbound. Chelsea, can you clarify the eastbound? On Haley.
So we don't have a photo of that.
I'm assuming this might be the block.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
in that block.
Yeah, and it's hard to see, apologize, in this image where existing street trees are.
Yeah, it is a little bit difficult. There's you can see some of the tree from the aerial image.
The big, I think
but-
it's a pepper tree right next to the convenience store. That one we could work around, but I think the ones in the interior of the block with the raised bike lane configuration, those would have to be removed. With the in-street bike lane configuration, there may be an opportunity to preserve some of the trees, just depending on the spacing and the parking.
And so that's something, if we receive grant funding, that would be further worked out in the design and standard process that we have community engagement throughout. And so it also plays into the environmental review for the project as well. So we would have a better idea at that time. All right. Thank you again for your patience. And I think we have till, it looks like about 6 more questions for those still on the call. This one relates, it's not related to this project. It was just a general comment about, I think, the route that this community member has mentioned that Ortega being a very popular route to get to and from City College from the downtown area. They had a question about putting stop signs on Bath and De La Vina streets with the so it'd be Ortega and Bath and De La Vina and Ortega.
There aren't any plans to put stop signs up.
All right. And then this was a comment, I believe we've have addressed this a bit, but it was, would it be possible to commit to not installing any class 3 bike facilities as part of this project? So we've tried, and we're all feasible to have higher level facilities, but that, yeah, one section where we do have class 3 on the downhill after you pass the Castillo Montecito intersection and headed back into town, that's that one section where it's shared, and then as you go under the underpass, then there would be a ramp to be out of the roadway as you climb back up the hill. All right. It was more, this is related to Derek about where it's a trait, or I'll read the comment that there's a trade-off, is the trade-off between a car through pit versus bicyclist safety. So I think it was in response to the lane removal and, you know, balancing between vehicle congestion and safety.
Yes.
All right. This just thank you for answering the questions for this particular person, and the improvements are much appreciated. So thank you. All right, we are down to our final comments. Thank you all. I wish the lanes were narrower and the bike facilities were a bit more protected, but at least it's better than today. Yes, we agree with that comment. Yes. All right, last one. Thank you so much for all your work on this and for collaborating with Caltrans to find a safe design, even with all the width constraints on Castillo. I do think the overall design will result in drivers paying more attention at the key conflict zones with the green paint, adjusted curves, vehicle approaches, better bike and ped facilities, as well as elevating those users out of the water zone with the raised design. Appreciate the design. So that has concluded all of the questions. I still see some community members on the call. Yes, let us know if you have any other questions. These are always just really appreciate everybody's time and thoughtfulness for all the questions and spending your evening with us. It's much appreciated. If there's something that comes up or you think of something else, as feel free to reach out. We have the project email address that you can be in touch with. If there's anybody that you think would be interested in knowing more details, please again share the project webpage. We'll post the webinar up on the project website probably next week. And feel free to meet us in the field at De La Vina and Haley Bridge this Saturday. And Chelsea, if you confirm the time, 10 a.m. to noon. And so, yeah, please come and meet us as well. We always like to chat about these projects, and they really get better with all of your input. And it has, since with the last time, with just being able to elevate portions and the underpass, just with all of the great comments that we've received in the past. So please keep them coming. Appreciate you all.
Thank
Okay, seeing no more questions, I think we can wrap up tonight's webinar. So thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.